All right. Hello, everyone. So nobody's watching yet, so I guess I'll maybe chat a little bit here. So some of you know, especially if you've been subscribers for a long time, that back when COVID started, I got interested in and involved with hypnosis. I for a few weeks, New Hampshire didn't lock down as bad as most places, but my gym closed. I didn't have to work, and I was pretty much batten down the hatches for the duration. I had a huge supply of food. I had just bought a cow. I have plenty of books, and there were plenty of outdoor activities for me to do. So I started hiking every day. But other than that, not a lot of socializing, not a lot of meeting people. Couldn't go to jujitsu anymore. Couldn't go to the gym anymore. Those were the big things. Um, and so obviously, like a lot of people, spent a lot of time on my phone. And some of that time certainly was devoted to a gay, I don't want to call it dating app, but networking app called Grinder. I'm sure its reputation is well known. And in the course of doing that, I was talking to people who were further away than normal. And just a sec. Sorry about that. So I was messaging people who were farther away than normal. And one of the people I started talking to was a little bit unusual in the cadence of the discussion. I think I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he didn't reply for several days, which is usually a really good indicator that that person's just not interested or they're super busy. Um, but eventually he did reply. And we had kind of this message tag that went on for a few days where I would reply, in the day, and then he would reply back usually around midnight. He would only send a few messages. We might go back and forth just a little bit. And then really it was like a 10 or 20 minute window. He would fall silent again until the next day or maybe even 2 or 3 days. But eventually the conversation got to the point where we were talking about what we were interested in, and he mentioned that he was into erotic hypnosis. Now, I had been fascinated with the idea of hypnosis since I was young. It's very, very prevalent in a lot of media, especially a lot of kids' media. I don't think that there was a television show I watched as a child that didn't have it, at least sometimes. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it's very, very common. But I'm enough of a skeptic and enough of an empiricist to have my doubts. When you watch it being done, obviously in media, you have to assume this is for show. This is an act. This is, fake. When you see it where it's not obviously fiction, you have to wonder, again, is this an act? Is this a placebo effect? Is this just people going along? Kind of strikes one as similar to, say, faith healing, where you can have people who maybe even sincerely believe something's happening, but they're just so into the moment that they stand up out of their wheelchair or whatever. And I think at some point in college, I had looked into online information about it. And when I started reading about it, it seemed like it was very difficult and very kind of iffy, and that you would have to get professionally trained. And so I was just like, this is just not a thing. It's not a real thing. And then all my years, being on Grinder, I'd never met anyone who had mentioned it or alluded to it or in any way talked about it. So this was definitely unusual for this person to say that they were into it. This guy was 18 at the time. He said that he had been getting hypnotized since he was much younger. I think he said 14 or 15 online. He had gotten interested in it probably for the same reasons I had, seen it on television, seen it in movies, having kind of walked in this space for a long time. It's interesting that certain things come up a lot. A movie that I never cared about, but that came up all the time was Jungle Book. A lot of people saw Jungle Book and developed car-related fantasies. So unless someone hypnotized you to not remember being hypnotized, yes, we will get to that. This was definitely interesting. And he also said something, and I don't know how he could know this. We had never met. He didn't know, me at all. We had never even spoken. We had just texted and really only briefly said, you would be really good at it. How he would know that, why he would mention that, I don't know. But he basically came out and said, well, you should try and hypnotize me. So we connected on Skype. And I attempted to hypnotize him. I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't able to do it. And then he suggested that he knew somebody who was very good, and that aren't children and adolescents easier to hypnotize? Yes, they are. And again, we will get to that. And hello, Bitcoin motorist. Good to hear from you. He said that he knew somebody who was really good at hypnosis and that they would be willing to teach me how to do it, that they would teach me how to do hypnosis. And the reason that they would teach me how to do hypnosis is because they like to get hypnotized themselves. They didn't know many hypnotists. Then I would be able to do it to them. Still very early in COVID lockdowns, relatively speaking. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So on April 11th, 2020, I know the exact date, we had a 3-way Skype call. And it was me, this person, I don't want to say his name, we'll call him subject, the first subject, and the hypnotist. And the hypnotist connects with me on chat first and says, it's nice to meet you. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hypnotize the subject. You're going to watch, and then, we'll go from there. So I go on video. The subject goes on video. The hypnotist does not go on video. He goes on audio. So here's his voice. Can't see any visuals other than the subject. And we're all in different places. He hypnotizes the subject. And of course, as I'm watching it, I have the same doubts and the same questions that any skeptic would have, because he's telling him to close his eyes and to relax, and he's closing his eyes and he's relaxing, but like just being compliant. Are we just playing Simon Says here? Is there anything physiologically different? He's telling me super relaxed. He has him a very common trick. He, says a balloon's attached to his hand, and his hand floats up in the air. So it wasn't, it was a little surreal to be seeing it live, more or less, like obviously online, but like happening and being able to interact, but you still don't know, is this real? Is this not real? And I'm watching on my phone. I don't have my computer. I'm in bed. I'm reclined in bed. I have my phone. I'm holding my phone like this. And I start thinking that I want to try it. I start thinking I want to experience it so I can know if this is real or not. And I start to relax and shift in my seat. So instead of having my legs up, I put them down. And then I started to feel like I didn't want to hold my phone anymore. It was too heavy to hold my phone, and I didn't want to hold. Because if you want to really relax, having your arm up like this is not the best way to relax. And so I started to set it down. And of course, by starting to set it down, the angle of the camera would would change. And before I even had moved my, my hand, 5 inches, the hypnotist, who ostensibly is hypnotizing the subject, right? And ostensibly I'm watching and I'm not involved. I'm only involved as a observer. I don't lower my hand 5 inches, and he goes, "That's right, put it down." And I set the phone down, and he says, "Go ahead and close your eyes." Wow, I can even feel it now. And it's kind of weird to relive it a little bit. He starts speaking, and I noticed right away he was speaking very fast. So you really had to pay attention, which is not an accident. It's not the only way to do it, but that's the way he was doing it. And he's talking to me, having me relax. And at one point he tells me that my eyelids are so heavy that I won't be able to open them, that they're lead, that they're glued shut, whatever. And I'm thinking, of course I can open my eyelids. They're my eyelids. It's the easiest muscle in the whole world. You could be at the point of death and still open and close your eyelids, right? There's literally nothing, right? You do it 10,000 times a day without even thinking about it. And so I'm going to count to 3 and snap my fingers. And when I do, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to open your eyes. So I'm thinking, I can do this. Obviously I can do this. I'm too strong. I'm too smart. I'm a smart guy. 1, 2, 3. And I could not open them. And as soon as I couldn't open them, I felt my heart rate just double. It felt like it doubled. And I thought in my head, I'm hypnotized. And it was this crazy feeling. I don't do drugs. Those of you who know me, I've never had a drink in my life. Never smoked weed. I've never done any hallucinogens. Obviously no cocaine, no heroin, no fentanyl. I don't drink coffee. I've never had coffee. I've never had a drop of alcohol in my entire life. No cigarettes, nothing. Okay. So I can't compare it to those things because I don't know. But I had never felt anything like that. The adrenaline, the excitement, and he very quickly did a couple things with me, had me do some stuff with the subjects. And then after just a couple minutes, he said, "I'm going to hang up and I'm going to focus on the first subject and then I'll call you back." And he did. And I was like trembling. I was shaking, and my mind was blown. Something that it seemed like it would be like discovering aliens are real or Bigfoot's real. It's this thing that I had seen in popular culture, but thought was probably fake, or that if it was real, it mitigated by something. And true, this isn't supernatural or anything, but the experience was incredibly intense and it was revelatory. It's like, this is real. Like I felt it. I can understand even people watching who will say he's just saying that or whatever. And I get it. I totally get it. It's totally fair. And I'll get into that. It is provably a real thing, but that skepticism I can totally understand. But the point is that it is real. And that skepticism is horribly enabling. Okay. So I'm not going to rehash everything that happened with me now. I have talked about that in other videos. I was so enthralled by the experience and what proceeded to happen. Basically every day or every couple days, I would get hypnotized by this guy, always remotely. He never showed his face. He gave me a name to call him, but I don't, is that his real name or not? He was very coy about all that. He was coy about every personal detail. Obviously, I heard his voice plenty of times. I was able to gather certain things, but he would hypnotize me and then he would train me. He would teach me how to do it. I started practicing. I started watching a lot of videos. There are frustratingly a lot of hypnotists like to kind of keep it mysterious. And so when they upload videos, often the videos start at a point where they already have somebody who is hypnotized. They don't always show the quote unquote induction. Induction is the process of getting hypnotized. And so it is more impressive when you see someone who's already hypnotized and they can make it look like they'll start with somebody who is hypnotized, but an untrained observer won't know that they're already hypnotized, and it will look like they have almost instantaneous skills. that they can just, snap their fingers and put somebody under that quickly. And that is actually possible in some circumstances, but generally that wouldn't be possible. But anyway, watching tons of videos, I read some books, and I started practicing. And, Grindr being a networking site, it was very easy. I put it on Grindr that I was into hypnosis, and I had people every single day ask, did they want to try it? And the very first guy that I attempted to do it with was not a success, did not manage to do it. I tried again many years later with the same person and also was not a success. So I think he is actually one of the 5% of people where it's difficult. But the next 4 people that I attempted, all of them, it worked. And it worked really well. They were able to have catalepsy, which is where limbs freeze, are unable to move. They were able to have emotional responses, feeling happy, feeling sad, uncontrollable laughter, becoming more erotic, more horny, more submissive, more dominant, tops, bottoms, all that stuff. They could have positive hallucinations where they saw things that were not there. They could have negative hallucinations where they didn't see things that were there. So for instance, I became invisible. Obviously, you're not invisible. You're still there. The light is still bouncing off of you and being received by their retinas, but their brain, when they're hypnotized, can just edit that out of their reality so they can't see you. It's insane, but like, it's possible, right? And so even as a noob, again, the very first person failed. Next 4 people, it worked. And the numbers people give, because people ask us, people's suggestibility does vary. It's a bell curve for sure, like everything else. It's not really related to intelligence. In fact, if anything, the more intelligent you are, the more likely it is to work. The most difficult subjects I've had were dumb. I have done doctors, lawyers, Harvard students, Dartmouth students, Cambridge students, Oxford students, professors, like STEM professors, like chemistry professors, law professors, many doctors, many nurses, lawyers, and I'm talking top of the class, top medical school, Ivy League. So I'm just saying that these are not idiots. Typically, there's about 5 to 10% of the population where it is difficult, and in fact, perhaps prohibitively difficult, where you maybe could only do it with sleep deprivation or sensory deprivation, or maybe with drugs. If what we know about the CIA's investigation of this is Operation, I think is Operation Monarch, it seems like the application of certain drugs like LSD might aid. I obviously did not experiment in that way. But yes, there are a few people who it's more difficult. There are also, at the other end of the spectrum, people where it's much easier. There's people, and there's also a skill as a learner. So the first person I hypnotized was over the phone, just audio only. It took 45 minutes. And sometimes I would sit people down, and it would take 45 minutes, an hour, and I would go over and over and over and over and again. But with time, with practice, you get better and better. And now, normally I would estimate 5 to 10 minutes is plenty for most people, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the circumstances and the person. Some people are incredibly fast. Some people, the first time, seconds. Like somebody who's never been hypnotized, someone who doesn't believe in it, who says it's not real, that it's fake. I've had people tell me it's fake. I'm going to prove you wrong. I just had someone at PorcFest actually tell me it was fake, and he said he'd pay me $5 if I could hypnotize him, and I got that $5 in about 2.5 minutes. Okay, so like, hypnosis is real, but there's something interesting. So what is the role of hypnosis in our society? What is the place that it occupies? It's a very precarious place, because scientifically, we're divided between part of the scientific community just assuming that it's fake, that it's placebo, that it's parlor tricks, that it's nothing that's real. This goes all the way back. It actually can be traced back to all people of Benjamin Franklin. When Benjamin Franklin was in Paris, Franz Mesmer, from whose name we derive the term mesmerism, was very popular at that time, and there was all this controversy if he really had these magical powers or whatnot. Ben Franklin examined it and said that it was fake. He said it was fake because many of the claims were ridiculous. Mesmer was claiming that he could do things like cure syphilis, right? So if you have an infection, you can't hypnotize the bacteria to stop infecting you. That's not a thing. So yes, there's many things that hypnosis can't do, and to the extent that Franklin was talking about that, that's perfectly correct. But hypnosis can affect the mind in interesting and profound ways, and to that extent, it is real. This is actually can be measured in MRI machines. They can tell whether you are or not. So it's not something that you can lie or fake. There's also tests they can do, and I'm saying this for you, the viewer. I know it's real because it happened to me, but I can understand someone saying, "That's your testimony." People say they see angels. I get it. There's a test called the Stroop test. And the Stroop test is based on the principle that by adding information, you will slow down in giving an answer. So what the test entails is it will flash the text of a color, blue, red, black, and you read back the color. And someone will take the test and they'll time how quickly do you answer, how quickly do you read the color? And everyone is a little different. Somebody who's really fast, Ben Shapiro, is going to read through those really, really fast. Somebody else, Joe Biden's going to read through them really, really slow. But then what they'll do is they'll take the test again and they'll place the colors, but they won't just say the color in black and white. The text will have a different color. So it will say red, but it will be blue. It will say yellow, but it will be green. And that requires your brain to do an extra step. Now, Ben Shapiro is still going to be faster than Joe Biden, but he's going to be slower than Ben Shapiro without the colors. Does that make sense? And this is always true. Nobody has ever gotten has gotten the same score. They always slow down every single time. Doesn't matter, genius, how fast you are, how good your vision, doesn't matter. You can practice, doesn't matter. You will slow down. You might not slow down very much. It might be very, very small, but they can time it and you slow down. Unless you are hypnotized to be colorblind. And if you're hypnotized to be colorblind, you will see black and white and you will do exactly the same. And I have hypnotized people to be colorblind, not to take the Stroop test. I don't have a Stroop test, but I'll be outside on a summer's day and tell someone that it's black and white, and they will just about have a heart attack. And you could say, and it would be plausible to argue, they want to believe it. They're acting it out, and it is true. People can fake that part of it. Someone can pretend to be hypnotized. It is possible, but they can't fake a Stroop test and they can't fake an MRI. So it is a real thing that can happen. But within our society today, what is hypnosis? It's for entertainment. It's in movies and TVs where it's depicted supernaturally or science fiction or just fantastically, totally disconnected from reality, exaggerated or having characteristics that are not tethered to reality, or it's entertainment. You have hypnotic stage shows. A hypnotist will come very often to schools, high schools, colleges. Can't tell you how many people I've hypnotized who I wasn't the first experience they've had it, because Dartmouth or local high schools or local colleges bring in hypnotists for prom night, senior fun night, opening weekend, whatever. And you can find lots of videos of this online where they go and, oh, you're a chicken, you're stuck to your seat, you think I'm Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever. Okay. But then there's also hypnotherapy where people say, hey, I can get you to quit smoking. I can get you to lose weight. I can get you to overcome your fear of dogs or become more confident with work or whatever the case. I saw a couple of years ago, there was a very extreme case of a boy in the UK who had developed, I forget the type of phobia, but he could only eat one type of food. He was afraid of all food except for a certain type of breakfast sausage. And his mother was, I mean, obviously it's not healthy to only eat a breakfast sausage, but that's all he would eat. And he was hypnotized to be curious to want to eat other foods. And he starts eating fish, which is it's very difficult for people like this to do. And so you have these things where in the entertainment, you can have people think that they're a chicken or forget their name or think that they are called something else. And then you can have these therapeutic applications where you can make somebody lose weight or quit smoking. Think about that. Quit smoking, right? How many people struggle with that? And they can get hypnotized. And I've done that to people. Okay, I've had people quit hard drugs with one session. But then the tricky part is that almost all hypnotists will say that we can't possibly abuse anyone. That yes, I can make you lose weight. Yes, I can make you more confident. Yes, I can make you quit smoking. I can make you believe you're a chicken, but I can't make you do anything against your will. Whatever that means. Now, sometimes they mean that in a syllogistic way. So that if you do it, then that de facto means it wasn't really against your will. So that it's a non-falsifiable thing. Like you could say vociferously for your whole life, I never want to do something. I'm against it 100%. Don't hypnotize me to do it. They get hypnotized to do it and then say, well, that means that they really did want it to happen. And that's basically non-falsifiable. I mean, you can always say that they truly wanted it. And hypnotists, when they're asked this question, because it's the first question that pops into people's minds, what does this have to do with consent? What questions does this raise about things like consent and or potential abuse? And they'll just say it's impossible, basically, that you can never make somebody do something against their will. You can only make people do stuff that they already want. And well, I think it's very true that having somebody already want to do something will help. So somebody who wants to lose weight and you hypnotize them to lose weight, that definitely helps. But without doing mental gymnastics and semantic tricks and syllogistically saying it's impossible, in normal parlance, it is possible to make people do stuff against their will. It's not always easy. It's not as easy as making them do stuff that they want to do. Some things are bigger asks than others, right? If you have somebody who says, I'm never going to I'm going to keep my hand in a fist no matter what, and you convince them to do it, yeah, that's against their will. Is it going to be just as easy to hypnotize them to go rob a bank? Probably not. That's probably going to be a lot harder. Okay, but not impossible. And like, I definitely tested this. Okay. So what would happen early on, especially, is I would invite people over. We would talk. I would say, what do you want to try? What do you not want to try? You know, and typically these guys were gay. There were a couple who said, I don't want to do anything physical. And with those people, I wouldn't do anything physical. But a lot of them would say, I'm down to have fun. We can do a lot of things, but I for instance, they'll say, I don't want to bottom. Fair. Okay. And I'm thinking about one guy in particular, but this happened a couple of times. And this guy in particular said, I don't believe in hypnosis. I'm literally coming here to prove you wrong. And I'm down to have fun, but I will not bottom for you. Within 5 minutes, I said, I'm going to count to 3 and snap my fingers. And when I do, you're going to want my dick inside you so bad, you will do anything to get it. 1, 2, 3. He spread his legs and begged and begged and begged and begged. And I said, you just told me 10 minutes ago you didn't want it. He goes, no, I want it more than anything. Do whatever it takes. No, I didn't do it. I've never had sex with somebody when they're hypnotized because I don't want to have that conversation later. But after we were done, he messaged me the next day and said, I want to thank you for not doing it. But also I have to admit, I wanted it really bad. There's nothing I wanted more, which is exactly the phrase that I used. Now you could, again, pick that apart and say, well, you didn't actually do it. So you don't, he maybe it was play. And if you'd really gone that far, and possible, yes. But there's the, but there's, yeah, the section. I'll get to your comments. I'll get to your, don't worry. But it would be weird if it could make you quit smoking or go on a diet or think that you're Superman, but it can't make you, do anything else. And the problem is that hypnotists have a very strong incentive to say that it can't be abusive, right? First of all, no one would hire them to do you would not hire a hypnotist, an adult male or adult female. There are female hypnotists as well, and they actually can do things too. But like, you would not invite them into a high school to hypnotize a bunch of minors. If you thought that it was possible that they could make them do stuff against their will, you just wouldn't do it. So they're not going to say that. You would not go into hypnotherapy, or if you did, you would do so under, you would take precautions if you thought that that was possible. And so they say that it's impossible, that it can't be done. Now, in legal cases, when hypnosis has come up in the commission of a crime, it's kind of tricky. So like the most famous case here would definitely be the Manson killings, where the family committed these horrible murders. And the prosecutor for that case, the guy who wrote the book Helter Skelter, I think I can't remember his name now, but he had this trick where Manson didn't physically commit the murders himself. But it was known, and it is known, that Manson was a hypnotist, that he had an unlimited access to LSD from a CIA-run clinic in Haight-Ashbury, and he was a hypnotist. And they wanted to argue that both that he was culpable because he hypnotized the family to commit these crimes, but also that they were culpable because, yes, they were hypnotized and brainwashed, which apparently they were, but that hypnosis alone can't make you do that. And so they had to have an internal bloodlust, homicidal intent anyway, that the hypnosis only aggravated. Basically, you don't want to, if you want to pin it on the hypnotist, you're absolving the hypnotee. So if you want to get both, you kind of have to split the difference and say both are culpable, which is what people do. So in all my reading and watching hypnosis, and I don't do this much anymore, but when I was learning, I watched all of them. If you start looking up hypnosis videos on YouTube, if I haven't seen that specific video, I probably saw the creator, right? If they do a lot of stage shows, I watched a lot of their stage shows. And only twice have I seen a hypnotist say that you can make people do stuff against their will. One of them is the book that I read. It's the title of the book is called Reality is Plastic. It's by a famous UK hypnotist by the name of Anthony Jacquin. And the very first line in that book is that the hypnotist is ethical. And he talks about, and he acknowledges the semantic debates, but says it's, for normal parlance, you can make people do stuff against their will. Maybe it's harder. Maybe it's not super easy. Maybe it won't work with everyone all the time. All true. Again, we have bell curves here. One of the things that I heard about back then, so 4 years ago, was this case in Florida. Back in 2011, there was national controversy around a school in Florida. I think it's called Northport. It's between Fort Myers and Tampa. And 3 students died in short succession. The first one died in a car accident, and the second 2 committed suicide under strange circumstances. All 3 of them had been hypnotized repeatedly by their high school principal, a guy named Dr. Kenny, or Kennedy. And I think Dr. Kenny. And he had hypnotized something like 75 students and staff at the school. Now, this all happened in 2011, so way before, 9 years before I got interested into hypnosis. If you went onto YouTube at that time, you could find, if you searched, videos of him hypnotizing some of his students. He would do it in his office at the school. And those videos were originally posted by him. He would upload them to YouTube. When this controversy broke, he took them down, but they had been copied and they are still out there. At least they were. They crop up now and then. They're kind of like, I don't know, the forbidden videos or whatever. There was a huge controversy, but really they didn't have anything on him. Eventually they came down to he was practicing hypnosis without a license. Florida is one of the very, very rare states to have some kind of law that you're not supposed to perform hypnosis if you don't have like a note from a doctor or something like that. And he didn't have that. He didn't have a license to do hypnosis, and so he was charged with like he pled to 2 misdemeanors and retired. He got his pension and everything. He left the school. It was polarizing because there were people there who thought that it was super creepy and weird, and also that he was culpable for their deaths. But he also had students who were very supportive and said, he hypnotized me all the time and he's the best and he's great and I trust him completely. And you could find interviews from the time, and then that was it. And then there was nothing else. And then lo and behold, Amazon makes a 4-part documentary on this that just came out, I think late last year, November 2023. So in the documentary, there are details revealed that I didn't know before. And I have thoughts. So here we go. So the first student who died, well, first of all, he was hypnotizing all the time. When you say, when someone says that, he hypnotized 75 students and staff, that would be a lot if you did that one time each, but he wasn't doing it one time each. He was having multiple sessions with these people. And if a session's half an hour, which they could be less than that, or they could be more than that, and I have not gotten a good sense of the duration of these, it becomes a full-time job with those numbers. Everyone that they talked about, every individual person who was hypnotized by him was hypnotized more than once. So this was an ongoing thing, a regular thing, a pattern. And I had wondered this, like, how long did this go on? So he also had been interested in hypnosis, I guess. Well, so in the documentary, they interview the guy. I mean, he's still alive, and they interview him. So that was crazy. I guess I can see why he did it, just to try and clear his name or whatever. He can't. Well, so the first person who died was a athlete, a football player who was getting hypnotized to help himself with pain, right? Football pain, injury pain. Hypnosis can definitely do that. There's even medical literature of people doing that, doing surgery on people. If you have someone who can't take anesthetic, you can hypnotize them and take out their appendix. So to those who are saying it's a sexual thing, it's not a sexual thing to hypnotize somebody and cut their appendix out and they just sit there like it's not happening. That's not a sexual thing. And I've done that with people. I taught a friend of mine who's a nurse to do that, and he says he does it with his patients. He hypnotizes them to not feel pain. Something that you can do, right? But this individual, this 16-year-old boy, had to go to the dentist, and then he was driving home with his girlfriend. And then according to his girlfriend, and I wish they had interviewed the girlfriend, so we're hearing this secondhand, but it wasn't disputed by anyone, so I guess this is true, that he was driving down the highway with his girlfriend after the dentist, and his arms got stiff, his eyes rolled back and started to flutter, and he drifted off the highway and crashed into a tree. She was injured. He was killed. And that was a tragedy, but car accidents happen. High schoolers are bad drivers statistically, so that sort of thing happened. The stuff With hypno, obviously the principal wasn't there in the car with him, didn't hypnotize him right then. He might have hypnotized him the day before. But I guess the allegation is that this accidentally, he was getting hypnotized enough that this just accidentally happened. With the other two, it's much more mysterious because we don't have as much eyewitness testimony. One was a boy, one was a girl. Both of them got hypnotized by him a few times. The mother of the girl watched the sessions. And one thing that struck her is that the daughter didn't remember anything. Now, amnesia is very common. It doesn't happen with everyone. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's very, very common. A lot of times when people are hypnotized, and I'm not saying this as a neurologist or somebody who's saying that this is exactly what's happening, but the impression that I get and that a lot of people get is that your conscious mind is off. For some people, it's a little off. For some people, it's all the way off. And it's just your subconscious at that point. And then when your conscious mind comes back on, it doesn't remember any of the stuff that happened. And this is very common. I wouldn't want to put numbers on it. I don't know if it's half, it's something like that. Also, some people won't have amnesia at first, but if they get hypnotized more and more, they'll have more amnesia later. So I've had people who didn't have any, but then after several sessions started to have complete amnesia. I personally did not have a lot of amnesia early on, but as I was getting hypnotized more and more, I did start to have amnesia where your eyes open and you don't know what was happening. You don't know what they said. You don't know what they told you to think. Sometimes you can figure it out because of how you start to feel or how you start to the things you want to do after. If you think about it too much, it can be really, you can go crazy thinking about it. The boy who killed himself was reported getting on the bus and freaking out that he had 11 fingers. Okay. I do that all the time. Now, I don't make people think they have 11 fingers. I make them think that they're missing a finger. And I have done this with chemistry professors and math professors where they think that they have 9 fingers. And they'll count 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And they freak the fuck out. It's been done to me. I've done it to people. Like it's a common thing that people do. You can make someone forget a certain number. So him thinking that he had 11 fingers is because he was made to forget a certain number. I don't know which number it was. It could have been any of the numbers before 11. But then he mysteriously committed suicide. Now, they don't go into graphic details, and that's very understandable. But they say more or less explicitly that both the girl and the boy who killed themselves, and they were about a month apart, did it in an unusual way. That they both hung themselves, but they didn't like hang from a rafter. That they were seated, and they basically more of a strangulation. And I don't like these details, but it's kind of important for the story to try and piece together what's going on here. But that they then lean forward. So like a rope is tied to something fixed, and they lean forward and are strangled. And what was unique about both of them is that there was no bruising, and there was no indication that they ever tried to release the noose, which is typically what you see apparently. That they were so passive that they just let themselves be strangled. Even people who want to commit suicide will just physiologically try and undo it typically. So the allegation of the parents, so the parents are obviously grieving and they're upset, and that's understandable, and they want to place blame. And this very strange thing was going on with this principal. So it's understandable that they would want to place blame. But the problem that they have is that they think that the hypnosis just has these side effects, and so the side effects for the first guy who crashed his car was that, he just was learning self-hypnosis, and he self-hypnotized and went to a trance and got in an accident. And with the other two, that they maybe were suicidal anyway, although they both said that there was no indication of that. But there isn't always, so that's not really dispositive of anything. But that the hypnosis allowed them to be so calm and so sedate and so relaxed that they were able to succeed where they might not have other been. So let me talk about the first. Hypnosis is not, it's not pharmacological. You're not, I don't know. It doesn't have side effects like that, but when you're getting hypnotized a lot, every day, every couple days, you do kind of become blissed out. And again, I speak from having that done to me. I speak of having that done to other people. I speak about people that I've met who are clearly like that. So the first subject, the guy who got me interested in this, that guy has been hypnotized so much by so many different people. Like, it's hard to, it's like his brain is just mush. He's not stupid, but like there's been so much put in there by other people that it's hard to know what is even left of the original person. In terms of like self-hypnosis is possible. One thing that I mean, people talk about what is trance, what causes trance. So it's relaxation, it's focus. Anything that makes you think about trance can put you into a trance, right? So if you just think about it, you can do it. Now, I'm not super practiced, but you can get into a headspace where just thinking about it will make it happen. And in my case, so I was getting regularly hypnotized April, May, June, so 3 months. And then I stopped. And I have only been hypnotized a handful of times since then, since 2020, less than once a year, I would say. But in those 3 months, I was getting hypnotized every couple of days, sometimes every day. And I do remember at one point, I went to the beach with some friends, and we were driving home, and we were talking about it because that's all I ever talked about back then. I wouldn't shut up about it. We were talking about it, and as we were driving, I remember starting to think about it and starting to feel myself going into a trance as I was driving. And it's almost like a vicious circle where the more you think about it, the stronger it becomes. And you can just spiral until you just go into a trance. And different people are different when they're in trance, and it's not exactly the same for everyone. And I remember saying, we got to stop talking about this because I'm driving, right? So I think that is plausible. Now, I don't know that you can really blame that on the principle. That's like if I taught somebody how to do yoga, like I taught someone a really good stretch for their shoulder, and then they decided to do that stretch when they were going down the highway and crashed. Would that be my fault? No, it wouldn't be. I wouldn't feel guilty about that. Now, maybe this is a little bit different. I would like to know more about. Well, here's the thing. We don't know. Well, there's two things. You know this saying in marketing that if the product is free, you're the product. Dr. Kenny was giving a ton of his time for free. He was not charging. He couldn't legally charge, but he was doing this because he enjoys it. When I do hypnosis, it's because I enjoy hypnosis. I have helped people, I have done favors for people, but I enjoy doing hypnosis. And if I hypnotize somebody, it's because I want to do it. And I've had people who want me to hypnotize them, and I'm not interested, and I just tell them no, I'm not interested, because I'm not a philanthropist for this. I'm not a philanthropist with my time as far as that goes. I do give to charity and I do help people sometimes, but like, I am not going to hypnotize everybody who wants to. And it does, you get to the point where people will just start coming like, well, can you give me this, this, and this? And I'll be like, yeah, I can, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to spend that time. If I'm spending time with somebody, it's because I want to, and it's because I'm getting something out of it. And there is no way that is not also the case with this Dr. Kenny. Now, I don't know Dr. Kenny. They are very coy in the documentary, by the way, about his sexuality. They never mentioned that he's got a wife. They mentioned that he has a partner, but they never show that person and they never describe that person. But I believe it is likely that he is gay. And a gay hypnotist man who is hypnotizing teenagers makes it not too hard to guess the motivation. The other thing is, many of these kids say that they have amnesia, and that's another thing. So people talk about, can you force people? Can you not? You don't even have to get into the non-will thing. If you can give someone amnesia, then there's a lot you can do, and then they don't remember that it was done. So that, and what could he do? And what you can tell someone, I'm going to help you with your anxiety. And you could do that. But you could also give them any other suggestion that you want. And Dr. Kenny clearly loves hypnotizing these people. And I get it. I am not that dissimilar. It's really fun. It's a rush. You feel a lot of power. It's super interesting the way people react, what they do. And what's fascinating in this documentary is he actually, in the present day, goes back to the school. And every person, what's crazy is every person that he hypnotized loves him. That they show, at least if there are people, they never interviewed anybody who had been hypnotized by him who had anything bad to say about him. And when he meets them again, he actually hypnotizes one of them. And they're primed and ready, and they just go right back into it. And you can tell he has enormous control over these people. And he enjoys it, and he is not doing it for free. He's doing it because he gets something out of it. So the likely thing, in my view, but here's the problem. The police, the parents, the media even, they don't believe they don't believe you can be made to do stuff against your will. They don't believe that you can be hypnotized to do anything. You absolutely can. Your sexuality can be changed. It can be changed covertly. It can be changed against your will. These things are not necessarily easy, but they're possible. And by not acknowledging that, by not being aware of that, they are blind to the worst types of abuses that can happen and do happen. Now, I don't know if Dr. Kenny did the worst types of abuses. I don't know that. He might have, he might not have. I don't know if anything that he did had something to do with the suicides. Teenagers do commit suicide. They often commit suicides in waves, right? If you have one death, it's plausible someone else could, right? So I don't know. I don't know what his reason would be to have them commit suicide. I'm not alleging that. It's not impossible. The parents seem to believe that they were able to do it because of the hypnosis. Does that mean that he wanted them to do it? I don't know. I kind of would think probably not. That would raise a lot of questions that I'm sure he would rather not have asked. But, when you're doing the staff, when you're doing the students, I mean, just think, if he's doing his secretary, he could get her to the point, potentially, and I'm not saying this is true, but potentially, where she doesn't even register what's happening. He could be bringing people in all day and doing anything, and in her mind, it's all fine and there's nothing going on. She doesn't even remember it. Oh, they just were discussing lessons. There was another case, not with him, obviously, where a woman was getting basically raped by her lawyer, who was a hypnotist, and she didn't remember anything except when she would get home from his meetings, she would, her pussy would be wet and her bra would be off, and her friends would ask her, "Well, what were you doing?" And she was like, "We were discussing legal matters," every time, and she got suspicious. She went to the police, and the police said, "We don't really. I mean, you don't have a memory, but we can give you a wire. You can wear a wire." So she goes in, conscious that something bad could be happening, that she could be getting abused. And he hypnotizes her to have sex with him again. Right. So even though she knows, right, even when in my personal case, even when I knew it was getting out of hand and that the level of control was deeply uncomfortable and I was getting to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore, when I interacted with, my tist, my master, like I couldn't necessarily stop him from putting me under. Right? He had triggers. He could say a word, not even audibly. It could be a text. So like, it's not supernatural. That type of control isn't automatic. It doesn't happen with everyone. It doesn't happen at the same rate. It's not always complete. There's lots of stories of people who are basically totally under control, and then they break out of it. I know in my case, he got distracted by somebody else and he stopped hypnotizing me for a couple weeks, and that was enough for me to kind of break out of it. And I've heard of that happening many times. These people that when I see the videos of his students saying he's hypnotized me many times and he's the best and I trust him completely, I see somebody who has probably been hypnotized to have those feelings. And the thing is, like, hypno doesn't cure syphilis. It doesn't heal bones. It doesn't give you superhuman abilities, but what it can do is control the way you think and feel. It can give you an emotion. It can make you interested in eating fish, even if you only eat breakfast sausages. It can make you disgusted by smoke, even if you've been smoking for 20 years. It can make you stick to a diet, even though you never stuck to a diet before. It can make you see black and white or whatever. And it can make you feel trusting and happy and devoted or whatever. And when I see the interviews of the kids, and you could see this in the videos from 2011 when they were interviewed by the media, and you can see them right now in the present day, the people that he hypnotized are devoted to him in a way that is very suspicious. And he can probably get away with it because A, they don't remember or they like it too much to ever say anything. And it does get into an area of, the ethics are quite weird. Okay, so like in my case, in May of 2020, I uploaded a video about hypnosis, and you can go see that video. It's still up. And two things happened that I didn't expect. One, some of you subscribers who have watched me a long time, and there's some of you who have watched me a long time. Some of you have met me. Even if you've never met me, there's, I don't know, 500 or 600 hours of videos, and some of you have watched all or some big chunk of that. So a lot of you guys who knew me really well saw that video and said I was acting really strange and that I just seemed like a different person. And some people reached out to me privately and asked if I was okay. And I was like, I'm the best. Hypno is amazing. I love hypno. Do you want to get hypnotized? The other group who messaged me were people who did not know me, people I'd never met, people who didn't know who I was, didn't know anything about me, people who were into hypnosis, and they saw the video because people who were into hypnosis were spreading that video around. And those people, and there were 3 or 4 of them, there goes to people I don't know, all of them were hypnotists, and all of them, in not so many words, were very suspicious about what was going on. They could tell that they could tell that I had been hypnotized repeatedly and that it was affecting my personality, even though they did not know the prior personality. And one of them, who was himself a doctor, he's a doctor, an Irish doctor. We started talking. We chatted a couple times, and he hypnotized me a few times. And he started asking me if I had ever wanted to be hypnotized before, and I had said no, that had never been my fantasy. But that I wanted it now, that I loved getting hypnotized now, is my favorite thing in the world. And he was like, is it possible that you were hypnotized to feel that way? And I admitted yes, but that didn't matter because that's what I wanted. So, is that abuse? Right? But this is a serious question without it. I mean, maybe a great philosopher like Stefan Molyneux could say, but it raises questions that I think most hypnotists have a very strong financial incentive to never answer. And so they will say that's impossible. And so if you see a hypnotist say that's impossible, they're liars. They're lying either because of their business or because they want to have cover to do. It's kind of similar, and I see Bitcoin motorists here. This is similar to doctors who perform circumcisions having a really strong incentive to never question the medical efficacy of circumcisions, right? If they were ever to say circumcisions are wrong or can be unnecessary, then they would be culpable and they would lose a lot of business. And so they have every incentive to never, ever say that, to always say it's medically justified and it's healthy and there's no downside and blah, 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 blah. Hypnotists are exactly the same. And unfortunately, hypnotists are the experts. So if this ever has to get litigated, who is going to be the witness who says whether it is or is not possible or true? Well, it's going to be a hypnotist, and the hypnotist is strongly incentivized to say that it's not possible. So yeah, let me get to some of your comments. So my read is that there's almost certainly a degree of abuse happening, and I don't know to what degree it's physical or not. It may not be at all physical. I doubt that, not because I have direct evidence, but that's my hunch. But it may just be psychological. I don't know that this abuse is what led to these deaths. I doubt that these deaths were intentional on the part of the hypnotist. Not impossible, though. I just don't see the motive for that. So that's the main reason. Yeah, let's get to some of these questions. Didn't you get into erotic hypnosis? I tried hypnotherapy once and wasn't too impressed. It relaxed me. I can say that much, but maybe I have low susceptibility. Well, so it can depend on the tist. So like some hypnotists are really bad. I mean, like, I've had people who say, "Oh, it doesn't work on me. I had a hypnotist and they were terrible," and then someone else will come and do really great. It's also possible that you have lower suggestibility. I find that far more people think that they're not hypnotizable than actually are. There's really no correlation there. A large number of people that I do will tell me I don't believe in it, and then it'll work. So it's actually kind of funny. The few people it didn't work were people who wanted it to work. So I had one guy who just, I want this really bad, and like couldn't get it to work. So like those don't really correlate. It is possible, and the possibility isn't zero. It's 5 to 10%, something like that. But one experience is not really enough. You would want to have more. And I there's a lot of hypnotists who are just bad at it. They're not very good. Good hypnotists are apparently rare. There does seem to be. It seems dumb because, like, having done it, and I found it very easy, and I've had a lot of success. If you're measuring success by what you're able to make people do and how many people you're able to do and how easy you find it, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people they use crutches. So they'll do something like, you can find videos that have like subliminal messages, and that's another thing that can work more or less. but they'll get people to do that, and then they'll kind of sneak in that way, or they'll just if you've been hypnotized before, they'll try and find out if you have a trigger phrase, and then they'll just try and use that. And like, it's really a lot of them are, and this is true too. There's a lot of LARPing. There's a lot of it that is fake. Like there's a lot of stuff on YouTube that is people pretending or doing it for views or whatever. That's all very real, and it is possible to fake. One common phenomenon, like in a stage show, is you'll have a stage show. They'll put 10 people on stage, and like some of them are probably really hypnotized, but maybe some of them aren't. But they feel like, hey, I'm on stage. I don't want to like burst the bubble, and so they'll go along with it. So all that stuff can happen for sure. If it didn't work for you the first time, another thing is people sometimes have an expectation of what it's going to be like, and then it happens and it's not exactly like they thought. And so they thought I wasn't hypnotized. So I've had people say, I remember everything, so I wasn't hypnotized. And that's not how it works. You can remember everything and still be hypnotized. Or, people would say, I thought it was going to feel like a dream, and it didn't feel like a dream. So, yeah, you may be someone who's difficult, but in my experience, most people who say that are wrong. And it's just kind of, a lot of people have this idea that it's you must have a weak will, you must be dumb or whatever, and that's not true. Does this explain why he loves Zelensky hypnosis? Who are we asking about? I've never been hypnotized, I think, but submitting to sexual fantasy definitely feels like being hypnotized to me. Lower mental barriers, susceptible to suggestion, etc. Yeah, I don't know. I actually would find if somebody was really, really turned on by the idea, it would actually be more difficult to determine if they were actually hypnotized, right? Because then you could just have somebody who wants it so bad that they're just going to play along, and that can interfere. So like when I have a session with someone, I don't want them to do that. I want them to be genuine because I want to know where I really am. Now, you can start to get a sense of whether they're faking or not. There are certain physiological things that I'm actually going to not say what they are because I don't want people to know, but there's certain things that aren't widely known, but that will often happen. And those are really good kind of like tests. Yeah, and also people don't all experience it. I mean, there's common threads, but people don't all experience it the same way. Are people playing into a fetish? It is a fetish. There are people who play into it, but that is not always what's happening. How do you deal with twerking impulses? You just let the twerk go. You don't want to stop those. Do you think Tucker Carlson was hypnotized by Putin? I have no evidence of that. There is apparently Bill Clinton is a hypnotist or studied hypnosis and apparently has hypnotic abilities. I've never met him, obviously, but that is something that I've heard repeatedly. There are, I mean, some of you have probably heard of NLP. There's types of hypnosis you can do that are more subtle. So like you can do the whole official session thing where you sit somebody down and you say, let me hypnotize you, and we'll do hypnosis, and you break out a pendulum or a metronome or whatever. And you can totally do hypnosis that way, but you can also do it covertly. You can do it to people who don't even know that you're doing it to them. I've done that many times. You can do that from in person, just by talking to people. I've seen that done and I've done it. You can even do it covertly through text. I have hypnotized people through text many, 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 many times. It's actually incredibly easy. Incredibly easy. And they don't even know. You don't even have to say the word hypnosis. You don't have to say the word focus. You don't have to tell them that they're going to get hypnotized. You don't have to do any of that. It's, Michelangelo was once asked, how did he make, his sculpture David? And he said it was really easy because the statue was always there. He just had to move away the excess pieces. So to the extent that you can be hypnotized, and 95% of you can be hypnotized, And even that other 5% probably can, but it would just take, some extra effort. That's a state that you're able to go into, and you just have to be made to go into that state. And like, it can happen totally on accident. You don't even have to have a hypnosis. If you've ever heard of road hypnosis, there's not a hypnotist there, or, hacking into your radio. That's doing an activity that is prone to put you into a trance. Some people are more or less prone, but it can happen, right? That's also possible what happened with the student who crashed his truck, that he was driving and he had an episode of road hypnosis. Another thing, it's just like anything else, you work on it, you get better at it. So like if I hypnotize somebody for the first time, they've never been hypnotized before, and let's say it takes me half an hour to hypnotize them the first time. If I hypnotize them again in a day or a week or whatever, it won't take me half an hour. It might take me 5 minutes. And it can get to the point where they almost instantly get hypnotized. And the first subject, the guy who introduced me to this in the first place, sometime later, I met him. I met him like several times actually. And he could not keep it together around me. He could not look me in the eyes. He could not really talk to me. I didn't have to trigger him. I didn't have any triggers for him. I didn't have any like secret code words for him. I did not have to induce it. He just went under. I've also had people, I used to drive a lot for work. And one thing I liked about hypnosis was it's something I could do when I was driving. I couldn't get hypnotized driving, but I could hypnotize other people on the phone. And there were people that I hypnotized a lot while I was driving, so they would listen to my voice, but obviously they can hear, the sounds of my. When I was really into this, I had a truck that I would drive, and people could hear the truck. And if sometimes I would meet those people in real life, and just getting in my car, getting in my truck, the sound of my car or truck just dropped them, because they had been hypnotized by that sound so many times that their brain was just trained like Pavlov's dog. Oh, you hear that sound, you go into a trance. There was a guy from Ireland I hypnotized a lot. We're friends. I've known him now for years, but we knew each other online for a while. He came to visit the States, not to visit me, but to do something else. But he was here for a couple days, and I picked him up at the airport, and he got in my car, and I didn't have to give a code word. I didn't have to say, Clay, close your eyes and listen to my voice. Just the sound of my car was enough to put him under. Now, would that happen if he got into any old car? Not necessarily, but because he associates me and my car with that sound, boom. And so, yeah, it's plausible that this guy just had road hypnosis. But if you're getting hypnotized a lot frequently, which sounds like what's happening with these people, your brain just kind of gets into hypno mode, and like you may not really come out of trance ever, or maybe less common, right? So like you get people who are like very, it's hard to describe. You, if you didn't know, you wouldn't see, but if you know, you can see. Like and yeah, it's very revelatory. Dan Brown hypnotized a group of atheists to be Christians, but it may have been fake because it was a TV show. According to the show, they were all made back into atheists afterwards. Yeah, so Dan Brown, I mentioned him earlier, is one of the hypnotists who will say you can be made to do stuff against your will. So I actually view him as a more honest hypnotist, right? The ones who say that it's impossible, and I'm not saying it's easy or that it's, that anything, it's not supernatural. It's not like so many sci-fi shows where, you click a switch and they'll do anything, but like there's a spectrum, and like you can get people into that spot, and it might take more time or less time, and there may be exceptions, but yeah, he's also done, I mean, again, it is TV, so the skepticism again is understandable, but where he's robbed people of, there's one where he hypnotizes a person selling high-end watches to give him basically $1 million worth of watches, and then he walks out the door and makes the guy forget that it happened. Now, I think that is legit. Like they go to some effort to claim this is not just an act. Even if it was, I find that very plausible. That's very doable, especially with a good subject. What's your favorite book from the Bourgeoisie's McCloskey series? That would be Bourgeoisie Dignity. Do you think that hypnosis is many different things that are all called hypnosis as an umbrella term? That's a really good question. The fact is, the bottom line is, we don't have a really solid scientific understanding of hypnosis. There's enough evidence that there's a there. In fact, I think Michael Huberman, who is famous for being on Rogan, he's a neurologist from what is it, UC Berkeley or UC something, and he's like, it's totally real. And there's lots of famous psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists who take it for granted that it's real. There's a lot of other ones who think it's fake or don't know what to think about it. People don't even agree on the terminology. You say subconscious or unconscious, and there's people who are going to argue that one makes sense and one doesn't. And like, I mean, the cliche is that our conscious minds are only some small fraction of our brain. We have so much that's autonomic and so much that's subconscious. I will say it's very strange with my best subjects, the people who seem like they go the deepest and the fastest. It's like there's two different people. There's the hypnotized person who will do whatever you tell them. And then there's the conscious person who has no idea any of that is even happening. And the conscious person doesn't remember anything. The conscious person doesn't know what you do in the sessions. They have missing time. So you put them under for 2 hours and they think that they just took a nap for 10 seconds. They don't even know that time went by. They don't know anything that was said. And then the subconscious person knows everything. They remember every detail, like every one thing. People who are really good at focusing tend to be really good at getting hypnotized. Also, people with really good imaginations are also really good at getting hypnotized. Although not always. I have one guy locally that I do sometimes who says he can't visualize things, like that he just, his brain does not create visual imagery, and yet he's a really good subject. So yeah, there's a lot there, and we don't fully understand. I don't fully understand. We use a lot of metaphor and descriptions, and but what is actually happening beats me. I one thing I've thought a lot about is this like some kind of cheat code? Like, we've ever heard of like how sharks, if you turn them on their back, they just pass out, and like that can't be evolutionarily adaptive. It's just got to be some kind of like little quirk in their biology. And is that the case with humans, or is there an evolutionary purpose for hypnotic trance? And I lean towards that, but I don't know. I mean, we can't prove it. There are some people who have started to say that hypnosis does seem to have what we would now call hypnosis, but maybe wouldn't have called it before. It was like a lot of shamanistic practices where people dance or fast or take drugs. They get into a frenzy, and then they get into a suggestive state and can begin. And I actually have, I mean, sometimes I've read stuff in history and I've been like, one explanation of, so like, being here in New Hampshire, there's a famous Native American chief from the 1600s named the Passakamaway. So there's like a ski resort named after him. He's a famous Native American. He was famously very tall. I think they say he was like 7 feet tall, and he lived to be very old, well over 100. I think that's fairly well attested. And there's all these stories about him, and who's to say what's true or what's not. But it was alleged that he could turn invisible, and that he could turn sticks into snakes and stuff like that. And I don't think that's supernatural stuff is possible, but I 100% believe that you could hypnotize somebody to believe that it happened. I could hypnotize somebody to think a stick was a snake. I could hypnotize somebody to think I was invisible or that they were invisible. And so I actually wouldn't be at all surprised if he was performing some type of now there could be other explanations for these stories that they're just made up or whatever, but assuming that they're based on something that really happened or the people some firsthand witness really believed, I would find it very plausible that they were getting hypnotized by him to believe those things. Now, whether he probably wasn't doing it because he had learned Ericksonian hypnosis or knew who Franz Mesmer was, because those people didn't even exist back then, but just through some kind of, I mean, I'm kind of shocked how low the bar to entry was. It wasn't that hard to learn. It wasn't that hard to do. I was almost like, how have I not just been doing? And truth be told, looking back, I really had hypnotized people before without even realizing it. I'm completely positive about that. Now, how can you do that when it's unintentional? Because if you do a certain thing with 100 people, a certain number of them are going to go into a trance, right? So I could see somebody figuring that out on their own, or having a cultural niche where it was likely to happen through maybe like some kind of shamanistic or a religious ritual. There are people who actually allege that one of the things that a lot of organized religions do, whether it's Muslims or Christians or Jews, but you have a focal point, you have repetitive chanting, you have, right, and all these things are going to actually induce trance in a certain percentage of people some of the time. Not everyone all the time, but some people some of the time. And then, when they say, okay, you have to donate your money or whatever, people will do it. Is this consensual? That's a great question. So most hypnotists in the world are just going to say that it's syllogistically consensual, that you can't make somebody do something against their will. In the Look Into My Eyes documentary, this was quite startling, actually. At the end, he hypnotizes one of his former students, and he hypnotizes them. And I've seen people look at me like that, and when they do, it means they are just waiting for you to tell them what to think and what to feel, and they are going to think and feel what you tell them to think and feel. But there's a part where he goes, how do you feel? He goes, I feel good. And then he's like, well, let's go do some more. And he starts to say no. And before he says no, like he verbally says no, it's on camera. And the guy just grabs his hand and goes 3, 2, 1 and drops him down. And to me, I mean, it's like he just said to stop. It sounds, I mean, pretty clearly. And he just drove right through that like it didn't even happen. And this, he's not a kid anymore. He's like 30 at this point. But of course, he would have been hypnotized when he was like a mid-teen. So like I mean, younger, like teens are much more suggestible than regular, not much. They're more suggestible than older people. And like, you can kind of like set their brains at that point. So, or at least this is what I believe. I have not had too much experience with that, but like, he says no, and then he's like, no, sleep, puts him down, and then that's it. He doesn't say no anymore. He can't object. So I don't know. Is that consensual? Neural linguistic programming. I hear NLP words in radio commercials. Yeah, it's marketing people get into this all the time. There's a lot of techniques that they use that are like just straight up overt hypnosis. Actually, the very first person I ever hypnotized had just gotten his degree in marketing, and was just like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to use this all the time. But he ended up not doing that. With my hypnotherapy, I had headphones on with pre-recording of a hypnotist's voice. The hypnotist was outside the room during the session, so maybe not proactive enough. Yeah. So files and videos, they can work. I don't think they're as effective for most people because they are not as interactive. They're not gauging you. So like if I'm with somebody, I am seeing what's working, seeing what's not working. I'm looking at their pulse, their heart rate, their breathing, their tension, their shoulders slumped, are they up? Like you get, I've been surprised just how you can start to see someone's pulse. You can see if their heart rate's elevated, if they're flush, if their pupils dilate, all these things. And you can kind of gauge, this is working, this is not working, go faster, go slower, try a different tact. something that, you know, currently can't be done with it. There's some point AI could do this, but there's currently none. So yeah, those can be effective for some people, and especially if you've already gone under, like they could be effective, but that's not going to be as effective as a real person. And like, I find that really strange that the therapist was just in the other room. So like, is this a case where the therapist didn't know how to hypnotize you, and so it was just like, here, just listen to a recording? Like, there are people who, you know, in the kink community who want to be hypnotists, but are just for whatever reason can't do it. And I can't understand why. It seems like if you just say the right words, it'll work. And the right words are, it's not like a spell. It's just, as long as you can hold someone's attention, you can get it to work. But they'll find a file, and they'll just have you listen to the file, and they'll try and get you hypnotized with the file. And then they'll kind of try to insert themselves in later. But I find that to be, I mean, when someone can't learn hypnosis, I find that really strange. There's also famously, apparently Sigmund Freud could not perform hypnosis. And so he kind of soured on the idea, and that may have like greatly retarded its acceptance in academic literature. Now, Freud was basically a pseudoscientist, but how he was unable to do it, I find that really difficult, because it's really not that hard. And yet there's people like the subject who first got me into this. As much as he was into it, as much as he liked getting hypnotized, he never learned how to do it. I had even asked him, I said, well, can't you teach me how to do it? He goes, I have no idea how. I'm like, but you've been getting hypnotized for years. You know, it's like your full-time hobby. And you don't know how it works. And he was like, I don't know I have no idea. It's a mystery to me. And part of the reason is he doesn't remember anything. Are you less and less into anarchism and libertarianism? No, I'm as fully anarchist and libertarian as I've ever been, and I'm still interested in that, and I still think about it and read about it, and it's just you know, I've made the videos on that already. So, you know, I don't make a video unless I want to, you know, cover something I haven't really covered before, or in a new way. And, you know, my feelings about the roads are the same. So I don't do it again. There maybe is an argument to do that, because there's people who haven't seen that stuff, or maybe I could say it better now, or whatever. That's all true, potentially. But yeah, I'm totally into that all still. Do you think hypnosis is shunned by the scientific community? Yeah, so the scientific community, the scientific community is divided between those who think that it's just completely fake and that it's hocus pocus woo woo, and the other half that think there's something there, that there's a there, but they don't know exactly what it is or how to use it. So that's kind of where it stands. So it's unusual in that it has a very precarious place in academia. There are certain academics who use it all the time and are big. And so if you ever heard of Phil Zimbardo, he is very famous because he's the one who set up and ran the the Berkeley or whatever, the prison experiments, where they had group A, group B, one became prisoners, one became prison guards, and they had to end it because the prison guards were getting too abusive or whatever and sadistic. Zimbardo's I think he's in his 90s now, but like, he was very, very big into hypnosis. Like, he hypnotized all of his students. He videotaped all of them. You can watch them, and I think he taught at Stanford. So like, you know, he's a famous, I mean, that was one of the most famous experiments ever. And he was hypnotizing people right, left, and center. That's right, Stanford. So he was Zimbardo. So Zimbardo was hugely into hypnosis, and he hypnotized. And I know some of his former students, and they straight up told me he hypnotized the whole class, and that was part of class, was getting hypnotized by Zimbardo. So, you know, he's one example. There's others. I was reading a book on what was it about? Yes, Learning Fast or Slow. I'm sure you've heard. It's a famous book about the different types of brain activity. And just kind of as a throwaway line, he said, the author is like, oh, well, I was doing research into how hypnosis affects focus. And he was talking about pupil dilation. And basically, the more focused you are, the more your pupils dilate. And you reach a point where they're the maximum focus, the maximum dilation, and then then you can't go anymore, and then they come back down. And like, I have seen guys where their pupils got so big that they fill up all the way to the sclera. So like they don't have any color. So, whatever color my eyes are, just imagine it's black and white and there's no color left. I've seen that happen with guys, like where I'm looking directly into their eyes and you can see it happen. Right. By the way, hard to fake. I guess it's not impossible, but hard to fake. But it's just kind of interesting. So he's a famous this book is very famous. He's a well-established academic, and then he just kind of throws hypnosis in there. So like as a throwaway. So yeah, I mean, but then you have others who are going to say it's totally fake. A lot of doctors used to learn it for anesthesia. I've heard that Charles Krauthammer, who is a total creepy ghoul, I'm glad he's dead now. The neo-con who used to be on Fox News all the time, that he was a hypnotist, that he would hypnotize people as part of his medical practice. So yeah, but it doesn't get, I mean, it hasn't been systematically studied, and as soon as you start talking about it, people don't know what to think. That sounds weird. And there's a lot of misconceptions around there. And I think there's a lot of deliberate obfuscation by hypnotists, that they are they have a very strong vested interest to misrepresent what's possible. And so it's rare for them to say that, so Dan Brown and Anthony Jacquin are kind of the only two I know. There may be others. But there's one, I'm not going to name names. There's videos on YouTube of a person who is a hypnotist. He's a stage hypnotist. He's not a famous academic or anything like that. And he would go to high schools and he would hypnotize kids. And he would hypnotize psychology classes, and he'd hypnotize a psychology teacher. In fact, in the videos, psychology teacher says that he's been getting hypnotized by this hypnotist for years. I think he says 4 years when the video is made. And, lo and behold, he invites this guy every semester to come hypnotize his kids. And this guy is gay, and he is got a couple fetishes. He's got a rubber fetish. He loves dressing up guys in rubber. He loves clowns. He loves dressing up guys as clowns and toy soldiers. And guess what he does when he does a stage show? Now, it's not even a stage show. He's going into a classroom, and then he hypnotizes the class, and then he hypnotizes the boys to put on rubber boots, to put on clown shoes, to dress up like toy soldiers, to dress up like dolls. And he incorporates it into his hypno, like, oh, you're a doll now. Oh, your rubber boots are made of magnets and you can't move your foot. Even though this is 100% his fetish, like his kink, that he makes kink content on his website that you can see. And then he goes to high schools and hypnotizes their teachers for years, and then hypnotizes the students to act out his kinks. And the gay world being what it is, and the hypno world being what it is, I know people who have met him and been hypnotized by him. I never have. And I don't even want to say who it is, but who he will hypnotize them. And he walks a very fine line. He'll hypnotize them when they're minors, but he won't do anything explicit that we know about. Or if he does, he's very careful not to show it. And then the day that they turn 18, they just become his toy. They move in, they do whatever he wants. There's videos of him hypnotizing people online where it will be a cute, younger man. And he'll say in the video, "Are you 18?" And the person will say yes. He goes, "Do you consent to being recorded and hypnotized?" And they'll say yes, but they're already hypnotized. Right? So did they really consent? It's really, really creepy. And there's many, many examples of that. And it just kind of flows under the radar because the hypnotherapists of the world and the sage hypnotists of the world are going to say you can't make people do stuff against their will. If somebody, it's just a random coincidence that all the boys from Reese Puffer High School have a fantasy to dress up in rubber and become toy soldiers as soon as they turn 18, and it has nothing to do with the hypnotist who comes and hypnotizes all the teenage boys at that school. Those are totally random facts. So, who did Crowmore have a feud with months before he died? I remember he had a big public feud, but I don't remember who it was. Yeah, I don't remember. I know he hated Ron Paul. I mean, that guy was wrong about everything. He was super creepy, but I don't remember who it was. So, all right, guys. Well, it's getting late. It's been a long hour and a half. Any final questions? Let's keep them hypno related for now. One thing I just feel like I wish so I don't drink, I've said that. And I don't mind if people want to drink. People want to drink, they can drink. But I think it's important to be as informed as you possibly can. And so I would have a real problem if somebody was saying you should drink alcohol, and also alcohol has no side effects. Like, doesn't make you drunk. There's no health risks. It's just like drinking water. There's no side effects. That would be wrong. And if I enjoy hypno, I do a lot of hypno. I think hypno is fascinating. It's super useful. It can be super fun. But there's a huge potential for all kinds of various types of abuse. And if you want to do hypno, you should know that's possible. And so, unfortunately, it is just widely seen as that's not impossible. That can't happen. Why did you get into hypno? So, as I said at the beginning of the video, which nobody watched because the stream just kind of started randomly. I got fascinated in it because it was in a lot of child media. When I was a little kid, many of the shows that I watched had, that as a theme in given episodes. And that's actually a whole other topic that I think is really interesting. Why is there so much mind control, hypnosis, whatever you want to call it, that's in children's media? It's super, super common. I found this going back at least as far as the 19th century. Certain imagery in certain books, a lot of the vampire fiction kind of revolves around that as well. So I just thought it was fascinating. Oh, you can control someone's mind. Wouldn't that be cool? And as I got older, I thought that's fantastic, and so that's not a real thing, and so I didn't really do anything with that fascination until I met somebody who was into it, and then boom, here we are. I watched a lot of shows, so I don't watch television much anymore, but when I was growing up, I watched TV all the time. And I mean, ones with hypno, Thundercats had hypno in it, G.I. Joe had hypno in it, Tailspin had hypno in it, Rescue Rangers had hypno in it. I didn't like it as much, but a lot of people say a Jungle Book has hypno in it. There's a ton of people who saw Ka and DuckTales. Yeah, DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, many, 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 many shows, right? And hypnosis is present in a lot of those. DuckTales, ooh. Yeah, DuckTales is weird too because they made a lot of capitalist anti-inflationary stuff too, but that's another story. So, all right. Well, any final questions? All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope you found that interesting. If you watch this later and it's not a live stream, feel free to leave a comment or a question, and maybe I'll answer it. So, oh, hold on. You got like 10 seconds. And that's been like 5 seconds. Do you think that libertarianism is going into a more conservative or anarchist direction? No, I think that what's happening is that libertarianism is growing in spits and bursts. So it grew a lot with Ron Paul. It grew a lot with the 2008 crisis. It grew, like, it's growing. And as it's growing, it's not like it's cloning a certain type of libertarian and just duplicating that. So it's not like there was a standard a type of libertarian in the year 2000 and now there's 50% more of that. It's growing, and as it grows, different parts of it are changing. So you're having people becoming libertarians from different backgrounds. So it used to be, if you were a libertarian in the 90s, you probably had been an objectivist at one point. A big slice of libertarians were people who have been objectivists. And there still are libertarians like that. But now there's slices of libertarians who were in the Tea Party, or who just got into Ron Paul, or who got turned off, like from the 2008 financial collapse or COVID, right? There's a lot of people who became libertarians because of COVID, right? They hadn't read Atlas Shrugged, and they didn't know Murray Rothbard, but they were really pissed about, I knew people who the crash in 2008, they didn't care, know anything. And that they were just like, what the fuck happened? And they found Meltdown or a Ron Paul book. And like, next thing you know, they're going down that path, but then they're drawing from a different prior experience. And so it kind of changes. And yeah, so I think that's what's happening. I don't think that there's a unified direction. I think that it's growing. And as it grows, it's getting a richer character where there's different character. Like it's vibrant, and despite its orthodoxy, it's also heterogeneous. And going to Porkfest is a classic, demonstration of this. You have people there who are so different, and yet identify and hold a connectivity through libertarianism. So that's what I think is happening. And when I say it's growing, I'm not like we're about to take over and, libertarianism is the wave of the future or whatever. I wish that was the case. It is growing though. It gets bigger and bigger every year. It gets, slightly more popular, more influential every year. It's starting to creep into popular culture more and more, but then, yeah, it's, you end up with radically different groups in it. And so I think that's what's happening. I don't think the movement as a whole like is going in one specific direction. Like the whole Trump thing, there's a certain type of libertarian who is like a MAGA libertarian, right? But there's also a bunch of never Trump libertarians as well. There were libertarians who became defined by their anti-Trumpism, but then also libertarians who just love Trump and think, Trump is the answer to everything. So like, what direction is that? Right? Those are, and then I think at some point you strain the bonds so much that you just aren't libertarian anymore. So like, other big events have an effect. I don't think the war in Ukraine has had a big effect on libertarianism per se, because it hasn't really split the movement, even though like I find myself on the opposite side of most libertarians on that issue. But like the war in Gaza, definitely, like Walter Block has been officially kicked out of libertarianism. Like the way Walter Block talks about October 7th and what's happening in Gaza and in Israel, and his like militant genocidal Zionism, it's just like, well, I don't think that guy's really, how can you be a libertarian? Like, and we can debate, well, what does it one make? Because normally you'd be like, yeah, Walter Block is Mr. like, it's the heir to Murray Rothbard. You know, this guy's written so many books and so many articles. I'm like, my libertarian adolescence was spent, watching videos of his and reading books of his and articles by him, and yet, as he's gotten older, his priorities have clearly become Zionist nationalism or Jewish supremacy, to the point of like genocidal war. And I can imagine someone being a Jewish supremacist and still being a good libertarian. You could just think, hey, Jews are the best, but like, freedom and whatever. And like, okay, that's fine. You can be a racist Jew and still be a libertarian. But like, if you start saying, yeah, we're going to genocide this entire group because, Bibi Netanyahu sent the army to oppress the people in the West Bank and left Gaza undefended. So whatever. Used to be that pro-war libertarians were welcome in the movement, and times have changed. Yeah, so I think that's very true, especially right after 9/11. That was another huge event that's kind of split the movement in a lot of ways. And you had the Larry Elders of the world, for instance, who said, I have all these libertarian leanings. I think he described himself as a libertarian. But then 9/11 happened, and he's like, I'm all on board. Let's launch 10 wars. And a lot of other libertarians kind of became defined by their unwillingness to do that. So Ron Paul, but even more especially Harry Brown, who heroically the day after 9/11 wrote an article explaining why this happened and whatnot, took all the heat. And then I think that really crystallized in like the Ron Paul 2007, 2008. People are like, this is not okay, what's happening. Yeah. Boop, boop. I'll find you a pork fest and maybe give you another try. Well, just tell me that you were the guy in the comments and maybe I'll remember. Some people just use libertarianism to fling their way into the conservative movement. People use it for all kinds of things. Like not always for good things. And also libertarianism suffers from the in-group, out-group thing a little bit, where if someone, like people identify as libertarians and that they find someone else who's also identifies as a libertarian, you feel this strong connection with them that they can take advantage of. So there's been no shortage of hucksters and scam artists who maybe are genuine libertarians, but who then use that as a way to exploit people. So I'm thinking now people like Adam Kokesh, the Anarchast, what's that guy's name? There's been all these like many crypto scams, like all this stuff. And they kind of feed on the idea that like, well, we're all libertarians, so we can all like get along. And yeah, I think that's any in-group, out-group is going to have that. You're going to have, progressive con artists too. So I don't think that's specific to libertarianism, but it is definitely a problem. Jeff Berwick, that's right. Jeff Berwick, the guy who said at PorkFest that Mexico is great because you can just murder somebody and then bribe the cops to get away with it, and then scammed everyone out of their money. What a douche. He was totally drunk the entire time too. That's another great thing about PorkFest. You get to go meet these people and see what they're really like. And Jeff Berwick probably is a libertarian. Like he probably does believe in, whatever, sound money or Bitcoin or limited government. He probably does actually believe that stuff, but he can still be a total asshole and or a jerk or there's there's freeloaders, there's freebooters, there's all that kind of stuff. And like being here in New Hampshire, like the Free Staters, they really want to help you move here. They want to help you, and they will help you move, and they'll help you find a job, and they'll help you find a place. But there's some people who like that's all they want is they want the handout. They aren't actually libertarians. I was struck because in my who I was and who I knew as libertarians, libertarian meant you had a bookshelf and you read it all, and you gradually became a libertarian because you had, done the debates with Mises and Rothbard and Milton Friedman and David Friedman, and you'd examined every angle of every topic and satisfied yourself that the state wasn't the answer and blah blah blah. And I moved here, and like there were people here, and there's people here like that for sure. There's a lot of people like that. But there were a lot of other people who were just like, man, I don't like the government telling me what to do, and like, I mean, that's a great impulse. It's a noble impulse, but like that is a totally different like genesis of becoming a libertarian. Like they don't read it. They haven't read a single book, right? Like, which I couldn't understand. I understand how like conservative could be that way because or a liberal, because that's what the majority of people are. So you just adopt it. But how do you have something that's how do you adopt such a radically different ideology when it's a minority ideology? But there's plenty of people who do. I think if it's going to grow, and it is growing, it's going to start to encompass things, different flavors and different emphases. And I think that's A, unavoidable, and B, not necessarily a bad thing. But then the downside is you are going to start to have stuff in there that maybe you don't like, or maybe other people don't like. So, the whole, I mean, there's the Zionism thing, and then there's the anti-Semitism thing. And like, so there are libertarian, like at Porkfest, there's a lot of Jewish libertarians, and some of them are like, reformed atheist Jews, and some of them are like not, and some of them are anti-Zionists, and some of them are Zionists, and like, so you will see people there. I mean, there's people that are like, obviously the state of Israel should be abolished and we should have no states, and then you have other people that are like, the only good state is the state of Israel, and the state of Israel is the most perfect state ever. I'm like, wow, okay, these guys are both. Now, if we were to talk about like the NRA or gun rights or taxes or whatever, they'd agree 100%. So like, are they going to both excommunicate each other? And the answer is probably not. You read Kokish's book? Did you give him $6,000 so he could teach you how to sell a tiny house? I mean, the guy has got mad marketing skills, but he's, I mean, he's a total shyster though. I mean, we'll have, now I think like the Ron Paul libertarians outnumber the objectivist libertarians, but you've got Stefan Molyneux libertarians, you've got Tea Party libertarians, you've got Free Stater libertarians, you've got crypto libertarians, Bitcoin motorists. That's actually good. Bitcoin and crypto has kind of exploded, and they're so tied to libertarianism. Like the connection is so overwhelming that a lot of people who were not into libertarianism but who got into crypto became libertarians as a result. Which is, I think, is something nobody would have anticipated or guessed, and yet that has kind of happened. That doesn't mean everyone who ever buys a Bitcoin becomes a libertarian. That's not true. But like people who get really into it get drawn into that. Well, what's the whole point of? The whole point of Bitcoin is to have a monetary system that is resistant to the abuses of the state, that can't be, inflated, that can't be regulated, that can be protected through crypto. Right? Like this is the idea. We debate how much Bitcoin achieves it or not, but that clearly was the idea, and they've come very close. If they didn't get it perfect, very close to the mark. So that's, and also I think social media and things like YouTube are also really important because they've allowed there to be so many more voices. So pre 2000 or 2006 or 7 even, what voices were there? There was the Mises Institute, and there was Reason and Cato and Fee and the objectivists, and they all had their own publications, whether they be magazines or books, with very limited scope and very limited reach. And now there's just so many like you've got the Dave Smiths and the Michael Malices and the Tom Woodses and the Stefan Molyneux and all these people, and all of them are different. As Tom Woods and Dave Smith and Stefan Molyneux are not the same. Some of them are friends and even like each other, but they're very different people, and they have very different points of departure, and they appeal to different people, and so like it's much more diverse than it was. I missed the 2006 to 2010 YouTube libertarians, actually. Yeah, I kind of wonder if that stuff still exists or it has just been swamped by all the other content on YouTube. That's obviously like when I got started. I feel like I got started right at the end of that period. My first video is from February 2011. And yeah, most of those people just stopped. Like they don't make content anymore. And a lot of that content was removed. And they kind of outgrew it. And it's been superseded by content creators, and some of those content creators are truly good libertarians, but it's a totally different dynamic when you're trying to create content. And whereas that period was, let's have a discussion about whatever issue, is Proudhon an anarcho-capitalist? Does Molinari work? Can we have private production of defense? And if not, why not? Does objectivism demand anarchism? Was Ayn Rand a statist? What, right? All that kind of awesome, the pith, like the really good stuff. And the problem is that stuff doesn't generate views and it doesn't generate a lot of content. And like, I've always known, in my case, for instance, that like this type of format just doesn't get clicks. I mean, there's no edits. It's too long. I prefer it because it's way easier for me. It takes way less time, but it's also more thorough. So I can really take the time to go into all these details. Whereas I could spend, all week editing a 4-minute video that makes only 1/10 as many points, and that would probably get more views. And so that's what's incentivized. But for me, it's like, why would I put in 10 times the effort to make something that's less comprehensive, right? So yeah, that kind of content it still exists. I still do this, and I'm sure other people still do this too. But like YouTube also became a place where you could make money. There's people who make it a career to make stuff, and most of them don't succeed, but some of them do. But then they get really, really good at it. But they're not doing it by having like intellectual discussions about anything, let alone libertarianism. This is the perfect time for Rothbard and Mises' collected works if we didn't want to have 1,000-word visual remarks. Yeah, there's even the Mises Institute has done just a great job just promoting Mises's and Rothbard's work, among others, to the point of like Milton Friedman, who was vastly more famous. I mean, he won a Nobel Prize, was on TV all the time. Like he's one of, if not the most famous economists of the 20th century. Like his work is not widely read among the reading public. He still has an influence within academia for sure. He's still respected in academia for sure, but there wasn't an institute that went around publishing all of his stuff the way Mises and Rothbard did. And so like in terms of influence on the movement, he has like almost none compared to the people at the Mises Institute. I mean, I've even heard David complain about this, and I don't know what to tell him. I mean, it's just the fact that like Lou Rockwell really dedicated his life to promoting the works of Mises and Rothbard and publishing his books and putting out the videos and having the university. And that stuff has had an accumulative effect where they have really saturated the market and had a huge, it's not a dictation. They don't control what everyone thinks. That's not an orthodoxy that comes from Auburn, but they've had a huge, huge, huge influence. Whereas Milton Friedman really hasn't, despite the fact that he was obviously far more famous. And you could even debatably say a better economist even. I'm not saying that, but like you could say it. I read that Milton Friedman was responsible for removing the gold standard. I've never heard that. He is responsible in part for withholding of income tax. Like he came up with that wasn't his idea, but he came up with the functional way of making it happen in World War II. I don't know about the gold standard, but he didn't like the gold standard, so it wouldn't surprise me. He famously said that from now on, inflation is anything over 2%. And if you have 2% inflation, that's not inflation. That's like zero. So, he didn't like gold. He thought gold was dumb and that it was a waste to put resources into mining it. That it would be better if those resources went to, anything else, building roads or factories. So, yeah, I mean, Milton Friedman, giant of the field, is a brilliant economist and a good libertarian by any stretch. But as Rothbard said, economists like to focus on the thing they're worst at, and Milton was the worst at monetary theory, and that's what he focused on. So, all right, guys, 2 hours on the dot. Yeah, culture war gets more coverage nowadays. A lot of libertarian analysis has just been done. Not unique or exciting. Yeah, I mean, what would you? Oh, yeah, the Fed is bad. Like, if you already know it, you already know it. You don't need to hear it again. Unless there's something new. So, and as a content creator, you don't want to say it again. I mean, I already said it all. I'm not going to answer that. All right. Thank you, guys. If you have any other questions, let me know, and have a great weekend. How do I end the stream? Sorry, I have the camera on a stack of books and I can't see all the controls.